It's no secret that I'm a big fan of a Fiat Panda, but what is the absolute coolest example that you can get? You might think it's 100 horsepower or maybe a 4x4, but it's actually this one.
And I'm wondering, Hammond, who has a little black Fiat Panda?
I don't know. At the BBC? I don't know.
This is James May's very own Fiat Panda that he owned for 8 years. 8 years that made it a cultural icon in the eyes of a Top Gear buff. LN56YRR is probably the most famous Type 169 to exist, all thanks to Captain Slow and his fancy for a Fiat. But why a Panda in particular? Well, in 2003, he was the first to lay his hands on a freshly baked Italian example. Clearly it satisfied him, because 3 years later, he walked into Fiat Marylebone and purchased this very car. You can fully see why James bought one of these, because ultimately, that's kind of his ethos. I mean, he goes on about the Dacia Sandero, but really, these are just as simple. He was hooked, and the car became his everyday hack, not without his fair share of Top Gear appearances though.
When I arrived, the track was enveloped in typical British autumnalness.
Right, here we go, Top Gear test track, my patch for the day. Now, I've been very, very insistent with the office. I don't want to find some look-at-me two-door Italian supercar with a 250 miles per hour speedo and a £250,000 price tag or any of that sort of rubbish. I want to drive something more like, well, to be honest, some... Oh, cock. Surely not.
Eventually James chopped in the car at BMW Park Lane for a then brand new i3, and the Panda entered the used car cesspit. So, 2 owners and 11 years after his custodianship, how does it fare in 2025? Shall we have a little look around James's Panda then? So if you start at the front, we've got some very fogged up headlights. Now this is quite a common Panda thing. They just tend to fog up a lot, and this is no exception. There's a few little marks here. We're actually missing the towing eye cover as well. But I mean, I don't know if I'm going to get this sorted, because it's kind of part of this car's history. At one point it was just used as a car. So I'm just going to leave that there, because as well it would cost a fortune to repair. So I don't think it's worth repairing, because at the end of the day it is just a 56 plate Panda. Now the wheels are pretty good. They've caked in brake dust, so we'll have to get that off. But these are the alloy wheels that you got with the Eleganza. He didn't scrimp out, did he, James? He got the top spec. With the Eleganza you get the alloy wheels, you get the climate control, and you get these cool little roof bars, which everyone seems to put on the Pandas because they just kind of complete the look, really. And I'm glad he went for the top spec, because they are the best ones. It's absolutely filthy down the side. I mean, we've just driven it down a road here, and I think the majority of that is just from this road, so that's the realities of filming in winter, but we will get it cleaned up really, really nice. Now, Pandas like to go on the sills a lot. I've had a few Pandas where they're just starting to bubble up a little bit, but this one, for 102,000 miles, is actually really, really good. And I think it's because it's spent the majority of its life down south and kind of just around the city, really, where they don't put too much salt on the road. So those are really good. I didn't want to weld this car, and luckily I don't have to. Tyres are probably knackered. We might have to put 4 tyres on it, but we'll see what happens come the test. It does need a test, because as we're filming this, I think it's only got about a day or 2 left, so that's kind of an issue, but I'm sure it will fly through, hopefully. This is probably the car he actually used the most, if you think about it, because it's just a fairly nondescript car, and I think that's what James was after. He'd mentioned a few times that this was the car that he just took to run some errands in and kind of was discreet. Nobody really spotted him in this. If he was taking out his Rolls Royce or his Ferrari, people would know it was James May, but in this, he kind of just blended in. Now on the side here, we've got a couple of little car park dents that I might try and get PDR'd out, but again, it's a near 20-year-old Fiat Panda. And yes, it's got that history to it, but is it really worth sorting that? I don't know. Because at one point, I think the person that owned this didn't actually know it was James May's. They didn't really know it was a piece of history. So it's going to have some war wounds and some marks, because 20 years of use, that's how it's going to go. But generally, for a near 20-year-old car, it's really not in bad condition, to be fair. But it's just a little bit tired around the edges, which I'm going to kind of sort out. So we have no idea if James spec'd this car from brand new, but if he did a very good job on the interior, because I love blue material. I think it might have been standard with the Eleganza, but you could also get a black interior. So I'm glad that he went for the slightly brighter one because I do like my bright colours. He's also gone for the lighter plastic interior. You could get a darker one, but I think the lighter one looks a lot better. It just makes it feel a bit more airy. To be fair, this car's a bit of a TARDIS actually when you're in it. There's quite a fair bit of room in them. They're not massive, but if you think they're on the same platform as the Fiat 500 and you sit inside one of those, you will never realise that they're on the same platform. This is a world bigger inside, and that's probably helped mostly by the 4 doors. These are far superior cars to the 500s because they're just so much more practical, and I find as well they're actually built a lot better. The 500s are quite fragile. There's lots of things that go wrong on them in the interior, like little trim bits and all sorts. Having said that though, we do have some issues with this one. That trim there is held together with gaffer tape. I'm going to pull that apart and see why, but I imagine it's just going to disintegrate in my hand, to be honest. The knob for the radio is missing, and currently the heater doesn't work, which on a drive back from London on a late December evening was not very fun. I was quite cold. That's quite a common Panda issue with the climate control system, and it's quite an expensive fix as well. It is actually a dashboard out job. If it was an ultra low mileage, immaculate example, I would maybe consider getting it fixed, but because it's also got other signs of wear and tear, it's not really worth doing. But generally, the interior itself, a lot of Panda interiors, the seats get quite worn, and this, I'm pleased to say, James has really looked after it, and so have the owners after him. So a really, really nice condition interior. It just needs a very good clean because it is kind of grim in here. It strikes me as a car that's not really been cleaned after 8 years, which is conveniently when James sold it. I think he would have kept on it meticulously and maintained it really well, and then after that people have just kind of not looked after it as much. He'd mentioned in a Top Gear episode that he used to have a little brush in his car to clean the vents out, and I imagine this was probably that car. It needs a good clean, but we'll get all that sorted and it'll be like a brand new car in here. Now, being the 1.2 litre, James didn't go for the fastest option, which probably fits with his Captain Slow image. He could have gone for the 100 horsepower 1.4, but I feel like that was probably a bit too harsh on the suspension for him, so he went for the Eleganza 1.2. But in here it is just a regular fire engine. Pretty good unit actually, they don't really tend to go wrong. I mean, this shows that with 102,000 miles on the original cam belt, you can do that. It's also probably not had a service in about 7 years, so we're gonna have to get that done because I can't let a car go out that's not been serviced in nearly a decade. If you actually look, that oil is incredibly black, so we're gonna have to get that changed. It doesn't have to be mechanically perfect like a lot of my cars have to be. This can just kind of be a bit of a museum piece more than anything. I was pleasantly surprised to find that there was quite a bit of paperwork with this car when I bought it. Sadly, there's nothing from actual James May himself because I think he probably had that disposed of for GDPR reasons, and I mean, he wouldn't want people to find his address, would he? So he got rid of that, but there is actually a receipt from an MOT in Hammersmith, where he lived, obviously. It's even got a bit of blood on it, and I don't know if... would that be James May's blood? Hammersmith. That is proof that it was James May's. We've got even better proof than that, though, because if you look in the service history, we have a gorgeous little Grande Punto on the front there, but that's not the best bit. Service history from when he owned it at NBA Sports Cars at Dunsfold Park. So he probably had this service while he was at work filming Top Gear, but that's not the best one because the best one is here. A Rolls-Royce and Bentley specialist. He had it serviced at a Rolls-Royce and Bentley specialist. I think that is just the most James May thing you're ever gonna see. Now there is also some pictures I got with the service history as well, which again show it here. I don't actually know where this is. It kind of looks like the studio, but it also kind of maybe looks like Top Gear Live or something like that. It's not a public picture as well, so I can't find it anywhere, so it's quite handy that it's come with the car. But we've also got a couple of articles he wrote about it. He actually mentioned here, next month, however, the Fiat Panda is going, and that's the real wrench. Her outdoors is heartbroken. It's as if I've said I'm having the cap put down. There you go. He really loved this car. The Panda will now disappear into the vortex of used car trading. If you need a cheap, small used car and you come across LN56YRR, buy it. You won't be disappointed, unless you're a perfumer. Because at one point he does say that Hammond was potentially sick in the back of it. So what's May's Panda actually like to drive then? Well, it's like driving a Panda, to be honest. It's not anything special. It's a little bit worn, but I mean, at 102,000 miles, you're kind of going to expect that. Now, there's a couple of little bits to sort out on it, of course. There's the tyres, you will need a test putting on it. That annoying ball joint, the key's a bit of a state, a knob for the radio needs sticking on, and it's just kind of neglected. And it's a real shame because I don't like seeing cars neglected, and especially not ones with a bit of history. But then again, I wouldn't have been able to own it otherwise, so catch-22, isn't it? But if it's not James May's Panda, I do urge you to get into one of these and just have a try, because they're excellent fun. They are really, really good to drive. And the comparable Citroen C1 or Vauxhall Corsa or similar, these are far better. No matter what Panda you get, 1.1, 1.2, the 1.3 diesel, they're all excellent, although I think this 1.2 is a sweet spot. But if you can go for 100 horsepower, of course do. But let's talk about this one, James May's Panda. Now, it's not a particularly special car. It doesn't feel anything special. In fact, if this was just a regular, ordinary 1.2 Eleganza, I would not have touched it with a barge pole. It's 102,000 miles. It's got a little bit of bodywork damage here and there, and generally it's just a bit past its best. But because of that nostalgia that I had with Top Gear, and because of that passion I've got for Fiats, it had to happen. I've always looked at it and thought, God, I'd love to know if that's still around, or I wonder if it'll ever come up for sale, and sure enough it did, and I can't believe it when I spotted it, because it was by pure chance. I'd gone to delete an advert on Fiat Forum, and I was just scrolling through, just seeing if there was anything for sale as I was getting to my advert, and all of a sudden, James May's Fiat Panda was there. It's just a great little bit of history, and for a Top Gear geek like me, it doesn't really get much better. And I think this is kind of up there with Jeremy's CLK or potentially Richard's Morgan. It's kind of iconic, and it symbolises that presenter, and it symbolises James really well. I mean, it was him personified. Bloody hell. I think these are just excellent to drive. The little gear change you've got, like an EP3 Civic, great handling, skinny tyres, and kind of no weight really. I mean, it's all just kind of at the top end, which does give for a bit of roll, but it's like driving a little mini van. But you can still chuck this thing around, which I'm sure James did back in the day. He did mention a few times that he would drive it at 10 tenths and he would still get 40 odd miles to the gallon. And this was his abuser car. This was the car he just kind of ragged, which I know in the context of James May is probably not that much. That gear change is excellent. Honestly, if I could have that gear change on every car, I would. Now, I've always liked the idea of buying a car with a bit of media history behind it. I'm a big media fan, and I love my cars. And if press cars could talk, they'd probably have a lot of stories to say. But I think this one trumps it. What do you reckon? Enough whizzing around. What about the fate of the Panda? Where do I see it going? Well, I don't see anyone using it ever again. I think its days are over for being a normal, regular car. I think now is its time to become a proper little bit of history, and it's probably going to be appreciated by someone who's potentially not going to ever really drive it. And that's probably a reason why I'm not keeping it for myself, because at the end of the day, it is just a Panda. And there lies my problem. It's simply an ornament to me. I have cars that I love driving because they're spirited, all of which I'll show you soon, and they are the ones that I'll grab the keys to first, meaning this little thing would just quietly slip to the back of the queue. However, before it goes, we've got some work to do, so tune in to see me revive this famous icon back to its former glory. See you then.